a slight change to the format in this edition of Old Time Trio. But to be honest, the film that we're going to be talking about in this episode is really worth free. We're talking about the 1927 American silent film Wings, which won the first Academy Award for Best Picture. And the film starred Clara Bow, Charles Buddy Rogers, and Richard Arlen. So it's a World War I picture made 9 years after the end of the First World War. And I'll just say it outright. It is astonishing. It's available to stream on Paramount Plus in the UK, at least. It's on Blu-ray. I think it's out there on DVD as well. It's been restored. It is the restored version from 2012 that we will be talking about today. So, Wings, Andrea. It's been a little while since we've seen it, but I think I would be right in saying that even after all this time later, it still has an effect on us.
I mean, yeah, I'm not fresh. I can't remember every detail about it, but as we start to talk about it, I'm sure it will all come flooding back because literally it's kind of become the benchmark. Like, I mean, going into watching it, I didn't have high expectations, really. A little bit, because you talked a little about it, because I think you had read a bit about it. And you said, you know, come on, let's give this a go. And we've watched and reviewed a bunch of silent film before and really enjoyed it in the most part. But it can feel, I think, a little bit of a slog nowadays because we're just used to the sound breaking up kind of the pace of it, and it keeps your mind interested. So yeah, fairly low, moderate expectations going into it. And I really didn't expect to come out after the entire movie feeling like it's probably the greatest movie I've ever seen. Maybe the greatest movie ever made.
I certainly felt that when we finished watching it, because we were only going to watch like an hour and then go, right, let's come back to that. But then our child went to bed. We then thought, let's just keep watching, because we had got so engrossed in the story. Let's be honest, though, the first kind of 10, 15 minutes were a little bit of a slog, but that's because it was very silent movie at the beginning, and I think that possibly could put off newer viewers, but it just got better and better. And I think the thing we can say here is it wouldn't be the film it was without its director, William A. Wellman, who pretty much invents everything in this movie. Every kind of cliche that you see in war movies from even the 40s onwards, every aviation movie starts here. Top Gun starts here. Top Gun Maverick, the biggest film of 2022, starts in 1927 with this movie. There's so many moments of which still resonate. And I think the thing as well is because it's made 9 years after the end of the First World War, there's something still quite raw about it. And it still feels fairly topical because you're thinking the people that are involved in this were involved in that war in some way. Yes,
I guess coupled in some part with the photographic style, it doesn't feel a million miles away from all that war footage that we've all seen. So it kind of has an element of that gives it an authenticity, but I think also just the fact that, I mean, certainly the director, I believe, was a fighter pilot, wasn't he, in the actual conflict?
I think so, yeah. So
I mean,
it lends itself, doesn't it?
Definitely.
It really shows, like, he has actual pilots up in the air. There's no kind of visual trickery.
The people who were flying the planes in the movie are flying the plane in the movie. Like, it's happening. They're actually flying. It's not sat in a mock-up cockpit with back projection behind them or any crazy tricks. It's guys flying planes, acting while flying planes. Like, what?
And you can see the clouds as well. Like, there's actual clouds. There's
like,
a real feeling
really,
of being up in the air.
There is. And like, I mean, I can't deconstruct this. There's so much to say. So even just in these flying scenes, I guess, which encompass like dogfights and stuff like that, you have the fact that the actors are flying the planes. So they are flying in, I guess, a choreographed flight. I don't really know what else to call it. So they're following, you know, where they need to go to make the action in the story happen. They're acting like how the character needs to react in that moment. And then the way that it's shot from several angles, so we've got the action straight on to the actor in the cockpit flying, and then we've got those like aerial from above watching the action. I really don't know what you would call any of this technically, that you see in, as you mentioned, every single other movie that contains aviation, basically for the rest of time up until yesterday. It's done the same way. And I just could not believe it. And not only that, it's not just like some fly on the wall thing, like it feels kind of like it, but also there's some beautiful shots in there. Like you said, lovely, like artistic shots where there's lovely cloud formations and the way everything's composed, like it's proper, it's artistic.
Oh my
and
goodness,
it's technical.
I mean, there's a moment at the end, not to give away any of the story, because really it's about these two guys played by Charles Buddy Rogers and Richard Arlen, who are basically fighter pilots in the First World War. And there's a sequence at the end where they're flying over battlefields, if you remember. And that sequence, I mean, knowing that a lot of these details must be fresh in some of these people's minds that have mocked this up, it actually looks fairly credible. Like, you look over and it's like that could actually be some kind of battlefield, the way that they've done it. I mean, there is a sequence where the guy's flying over and he's basically just shooting in the battlefield. And there's such a sense, like in this modern era of everything's got to be really big and sensational. And yet there's this film from 1927 that's offering it in spades. I mean, I don't know whether you remember the fact that there is a scene where somebody's engine stalls and you then remember this is real. This isn't a special effect. This isn't a couple of people flying with models in the air. This is a real plane, and the plane just goes woof, and it goes down. And I really just did the sound effect to explain, you know, what happened. Incredible. And when somebody jumps out of a plane and they get shot on the way down, and their body just lands and again, you can't hear the crunch.
Oh my goodness, I forgot about that.
But you can see it. It's like, wow.
Oh my goodness. I forgot about that. Yeah, so obviously in the story, what's happening is one of the airmen is shot down, so he jumps out of the plane with his parachute. Am I remembering that correctly?
Mm-hmm.
And as you say, the parachute gets shot, or he gets shot something, and he just falls out of the sky, basically. And like, you've got this kind of like wide shot, I suppose you would call it, show, you know, not like way close up on him. And you just see his body like properly hit the deck, and it's like, is he okay? Like, for a second, it just takes you out of the movie because you're like, they just did that. He just fell on the ground like a sack of potatoes, not like a stunt man doing a, tuck and roll or whatever. Like, it made my body hurt for a second to watch it.
It was outrageous. You literally went, whoa,
Yeah.
whoa. What's going on here?
I mean, it was a roller coaster. It was incredible watching this film. I really there is so much to deconstruct, as I said already. Like, I mean, when we got to the end of the movie, I think we were exhausted because it was such a, visual experience, I guess, or experience in general, because it's not just what you're seeing, it's like what's implied and what you can sense behind it all, and like the sense of authenticity, the story that you were so invested, and then it really, actually, it's quite impactful in a way, the story.
So there's a couple of things I think we should note here. The version that we're talking about is the 2012 restoration, where they went back to the original manuscript for the music and stuff, and they re-recorded it. And for versions of the film, they had sound effects. So they recreated those sound effects, which I think to us, the modern audience, I mean, the visuals would be impactful anyway, but to us, the modern audience, those sound effects made it even more thrilling, I think, to go along with the visuals. Also, in terms of the visuals, there was moments where you see planes on fire, and it was red, and we were like, okay, what have they done here? They've done some kind of trickery in the restoration.
Yeah, like this burning effect.
And actually, no, they did that originally, and you're like, what?
It was like some special process on the film or something, yeah, that created a colour, like a colour burst.
And yeah, it's so effective. The other thing is, as well, that's really just a blip on the radar, but for modernish viewers, Gary Cooper makes an appearance in this movie, but to be honest, blink and you miss him.
Yeah, I mean, he was a bit part in this.
Oh, it definitely is funny, because the trailer for the restoration is like, and Gary Cooper in the role that made his name. And you're like, okay, what's he going to do? Is he going to be like, is he the enemy? Because, he doesn't have to do accents or anything like that. No, he's literally in it for like 2 minutes.
Yeah, just like one of their mates.
And then he disappears. But apparently it's the movie that made his name. Good luck to him. The other thing that we should perhaps mention as well is it contains, this movie, one of the biggest stars of the era, Clara Bow, who you could look at it and go, oh, she's been kind of relegated to second base on this, because the men's story is what you're mainly focused on, but she is kind of she's the girl who they almost both lust after in some way, but she's a lot more than that. I mean, I think she said before in this movie she's basically eye candy, but there's a lot more to it than that, because she gets involved in the war in this film. And there's one sequence in particular where is it a village gets bombed or something?
Yes.
And the way in which she's involved in it, and it was incredible. And it's like, that's Clara Bow in this action sequence, and it's amazing.
Yeah, completely. And she is somewhat of a second fiddle in a way, I guess, as you say. I think she's that character who sort of like sews together a lot of really important elements. Her traveling through her part of the story journey, I guess, kind of brings together all the other elements and transitions one to the next and ties them together and makes it make sense, I think.
She's involved in a great sequence in France where there's that amazing dolly shot, which everybody always talks about. And there are other moments as well in the movie. I don't want to spoil it too much. This film needs to be seen, and I think it's on Paramount Plus because of the fact it's their first Academy Award winner. It's the first Academy Award winner. And what a film. I think even if I watched this in silent, without the sound effects, without the kind of things that they added in, this would still be one of the best films I've ever seen, because everything kind of follows on. I mean, one thing we've noted before when we've talked about this film in private is William A. Wellman gave portable cameras to people in the battlefield sequences so they could catch the planes going over.
Yes.
So that it could be cut in. And that to me was like, in 1927, think about this, when most cameras were like really heavy things. In 1927, those people that you see in the battlefield from a distance, some of them have got cameras.
Yeah.
Cameras.
And that's a pretty accepted modern idea, isn't it? So probably in the last 10 years, I think that's come much more to prominence, where actors in movies have been given handheld cameras in order to capture a different feel, I guess, of certain shots to add in and give us a different perspective in the film. But when I read after we'd watched it that this was the case, I was like, I mean, that's just an example, probably the most stark example for me of, I mean, did Mr. Wellman not just go, like, is he not from now and he just went back in time and made that movie?
I have no idea.
Where did his ideas come from? How did he get these ideas? And then they didn't become commonplace again for decades.
And yet there it is in this movie from 1927.
Yeah.
Which is, we're going to keep saying incredible, amazing. I'm running out of adjectives for this.
Yes.
Because this really is a benchmark. And one of the reasons why we wanted to talk about this film is because people should see this. Because not only is it visually great, the restoration is brilliant. It adds lots of things that, to be honest, were pretty much already there. The story is compelling. There are a lot of visual and storytelling firsts in it. It also has a poignant message about war in it, which at the end was like, wow, you got me there. It was like the perfect kind of trio of things. It's like, this movie is perfect, even with its flaws, with some of the things where you're like, oh, you went a bit silent movie-ish there. And that's not to detract from it, but when something is so kind of modernistic in its ideas and in its approach, just the ever so slightly things that you really associate with the silent film era, which perhaps haven't carried over, it kind of maybe detracts from it slightly. But apart from that, it is this incredible just landmark in film that people should see. And that is why we decided to talk about it and dedicate an entire episode to it. There's so much more. I think we could talk about this for an hour, but I think we're going to leave it there. Wings from 1927 is available on Paramount Plus. It's on Blu-ray via Eureka, and it should be on TV somewhere. And they should put it on, because this is not like any other film I think I've ever seen. I want to go and see William A. Wellman's other work as well. He worked extensively with John Wayne later in his career. I'd love to see how some of those ideas translate to that. I feel like he made The High and Mighty as well.
Yeah, I think so. That's not a bad film.
No. Well, there we are. But this film is exceptional. Everybody is amazing in it. See it however you can. Thank you so much for listening to this edition of the Old Time Trio podcast.